What's up, everybody? As part of our ongoing coverage of the Cincinnati Bengals facing the Las Vegas Raiders. I almost call them Oakland Raiders still.
That's okay. You can. It's okay.
I almost do. The Las Vegas Raiders in the wild card round. A huge game for a number of years for both teams. I've got a special guest from the BLEAV Podcast Network, Dennis Ackerman, who co-hosts the BLEAV Raiders podcast with former Raider Stanford Routt. We're going to talk a little bit here about the upcoming matchup. Dennis, thanks for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm well, Anthony. Thanks so much for having me on. Hey, was that Ken Anderson in your montage?
It was.
Former
was.
Bengals quarterback?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm old enough to remember he was the first Bengals quarterback that I remember. Him and I think Isaac Curtis was their wide receiver. So I go back a little bit of ways. But yeah, the Bengals had some good teams in the 70s. The Raiders and Bengals faced off, I remember, a few times in the 1970s in the playoffs.
Yeah, the Raiders, I think, got the best of that, as has been a little bit of the case with some recent big games. And look, I want to talk about this year's team. I want to talk about this game. I want to talk about matchups and all that kind of stuff. I appreciate your time. I'm going to be considerate of it. I do want to go back because you kind of – I wasn't going to ask you this, but now I guess I am because you went in the Wayback Machine with Ken Anderson and Isaac Curtis and whatnot. Look, I don't know what Raiders fans think of this whole curse of Bo Jackson thing, but it is a kind of a real palpable thing among the Bengals fan base. Obviously, Bo Jackson suffering that horrible hip injury in the playoff game. In that game, the Raiders still ended up winning. The Bengals have not won a playoff game in 31 years since. 7 other tries, had the lost decade in the 90s. How do Raiders fans look at that moment? The curse of Bo Jackson. Do they even care about it? I don't know. I guess from the other side of the fence, I'd like to get your take on that.
You know what, Anthony? That was 31 years ago today, and it was at the LA Coliseum when the Raiders were based here in Los Angeles, and I was at that game. And, he was running down the right sideline. I think it was in the second half, and it looked like just a normal tackle, like you got brought down from behind. And I think about it now, it was probably today it probably would have been called horse collar tackle, but it didn't look anything career threatening or career ending for Bo Jackson. And unfortunately, that was the last game he ever played in. But, and I think people look at it more like it was a great career, one of the best athletes that we've probably seen in our generation. Unfortunately, his football career came to an end that day. But, he still went on to play baseball. I think he finished his career playing for the Chicago White Sox. So, you know what? It was a career cut short. I don't think the Raiders, Raider fans, Raider Nation think of it any kind of curse or anything like that. It was just an unfortunate injury. Unfortunately, they happen. And it happened to one of the greatest athletes that we'd ever seen in Bo Jackson that day.
I remember as a young kid in Orange County, the Anaheim Stadium was hosting the baseball all-star game. And I went to a practice the day before, and Bo Jackson, this was like 89, 90, something like that. So right before the injury occurred, just was walloping the ball out of the park and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And I just remember Bo Jackson just going, oh my gosh, this guy's just ridiculous. And obviously growing up playing Tecmo Bowl on the old school Nintendo, Bo Jackson was the all-star in that game. So anyway, I kind of wanted to start there.
Anthony, did he hit a home run in that all-star game?
I can't remember if he did. I was like a little guy, so I don't really remember. I'd have to go back and look. But it was taking batting practice, and the ball was just taken off of his bat. It was absurd. But I do want to talk about this year's team because in a weird way, there were a lot of times I get a lot of Raiders talk out here on Sports Talk Radio and stuff just locally where I live, and I hear a lot about the Raiders, and a lot of people for a while were down on this team. And they were very inconsistent. They lost pretty big to the Bengals, though that was a really close game for 3.5 quarters. Now, all of a sudden, they win 4 in a row. They've been through all this stuff, right? The coach and Henry Ruggs and all kinds of different stuff that has almost galvanized this team. What's your take on this team and how they got here 10-7 in the wild card round facing the Bengals?
Well, to me, the fortitude and resolve that this entire organization has shown throughout this season, they got off to a great start, 3-0, then they lost a couple in a row. And then you had the John Gruden. Then you had Henry Ruggs, Damon Arnett, and then Nate Hobbs just a couple of weeks ago. At one point, Anthony, they lost 5 of 6. And at that point, they were 6-7, and they just looked a complete mess. And at that point, they had to win 4 in a row just for a shot at making the playoffs. I didn't think it was possible. My co-host Stanford Rat and I had basically both written them off. We'd written off Derek Carr coming back, Rich Bisaccia we didn't think was coming back. And then out of nowhere, they had put together a 4-game winning streak. They beat Cleveland, then they beat Denver, they beat Indianapolis on the road, and in that Sunday night thriller, what a game. I think it might have been the game of the year in the NFL, knocking off the Chargers to claim the 5th seed. And, those 4 wins are by a combined 12 points. And I know a lot of people are down on Derek Carr. He's split this fan base 50-50. 50% of them absolutely love him. 50% want to see him gone. But you know what? When it's come down to it, he, in his career since 2014, he has 30 games where he's led the Raiders either in overtime or in the fourth quarter to game-winning drives. So it's his leadership. He's now the face of this franchise. And because of his leadership, I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons they're in the postseason, and they're going to play the Bengals on Saturday.
So let's talk about those 4 games real quick, because there's kind of a couple schools of thought, right? One is you can only play who's in front of you, and you got to beat who's in front of you, and you got to take care of your business regardless of who it is. But there's also reality where the Browns aren't in the playoffs, the Broncos aren't in the playoffs, the Colts aren't in the playoffs, the Chargers aren't in the playoffs, and the Browns team, that was a battered team between injuries and COVID and all that kind of stuff. I guess my question with that is, I personally am impressed with the 4-0 finish to the season for the Raiders, despite who they played. But I think there's also an argument saying, well, they kind of lucked into some teams that maybe were struggling or did not make the playoffs. What would your response to that be?
Well, I'll have to disagree with that. One of the reasons why is the Indianapolis Colts were going to be a playoff team until the Raiders went into Indianapolis in their own backyard and beat them 23-20, and they had to rally for that win in the fourth quarter. The LA Chargers were a playoff team until the Raiders knocked them off on Sunday night and knocked them out of the playoffs, allowing the Pittsburgh Steelers to make it. So, like you said, Anthony, you play who's on your schedule. You play who you're lining up against. And I know the Raiders caught a couple of breaks going up against Nick Mullins, the third-string quarterback for Denver, but they also beat Carson Wentz. And they beat Justin Herbert, who you can make the argument is one of the top 10 quarterbacks in this league, along with Joe Burrow. So they've had to earn it. Nobody was feeling sorry for the Raiders when John Gruden resigned. Nobody was feeling sorry for the Raiders when they lost Henry Ruggs and they lost Damon Arnett. So, look, it's the bottom line is you play who's on your schedule, you play who you line up against, and the Raiders won 4 in a row, and they're in the playoffs for the first time since 2016.
Talking with Dennis Ackerman, one of the hosts of the BLEAV in Raiders podcast, is part of the BLEAV podcast network, where we've got an awesome partnership with them. They've fed us a lot of great guests, including yourself. Dennis co-hosts that podcast along with former Raider Stanford Routt. They also have an additional Raiders podcast in the BLEAV network with former Bengals Adam Jones and Solomon Wilcott. So definitely check out both shows there. I've got a question here. Look, and this is a live chat one here. If I was to make a short list of Coach of the Year candidates, I would actually pit 2 of the coaches in this game alone in that conversation, Zach Taylor and Rich Bisaccia, as well as maybe Mike Tomlin of the Steelers, just based on expectations and what those teams were able to achieve this year. Rich Bisaccia may be the top of that list, first interim coach to ever make a postseason. And the question here from John Telly is, any chance that their interim coach is retained long-term? I don't know if this weekend is dependent upon it. I don't know if just making it to the postseason is dependent upon it. I've been really, really impressed as to what that guy has been able to do with this team and getting them just here in general.
Well, you know what, John, if you would have asked me this question 4 weeks ago, I said, no way, he's not going to be back. And now I'm on the belief that he has done enough. The fact is that the Raiders made the playoffs, as I said earlier, for the first time since 2016, only the second time since 2002. And we talked about earlier everything that this team has been through on and off the field. I know there's the Jim Harbaugh rumors out there. He's now showing interest in the NFL? Is it Chicago? Is it Miami? He has ties to the Raiders. Harbaugh, he was the quarterback's coach there in 2002, 2003. He was very close to the Al Davis, father of Mark Davis. So I personally think that Bisaccia has done enough to earn a long-term extension. I do. I don't think it really matters what happens this weekend. Maybe Mark Davis might feel different if the Raiders lay an egg in Cincinnati and get blown out. But I just think it is a remarkable accomplishment what he has done since he has taken over to get this team into the playoffs. And it's not like they're the 7th seed. They're the 5th seed, so they didn't back their way in. There was a lot of talk, maybe the Raiders and Chargers will just tie. And there was talk that the Raiders could have settled for a tie at the end of overtime. Rich Bisaccia was not playing for a tie. He wanted to win that game because let me tell you, Anthony, the Raiders, if they ended up in a tie, would have been the 7th seed. They would have to go to Kansas City, and Kansas City has manhandled them twice this year. So there's no way that the Raiders wanted to finish 7th.
Well, I believe in my heart of hearts, I think he at least deserves a shot or at least a solid shortlist interview type of thing. Opportunity for him based on what he's done. I do think that the Raiders do like to get a little splashy, obviously it being in Vegas and the whole deal. They may go a different direction, but he has done everything and more to at least be considered for that. Dennis, let's transition to this week's game. I want to talk about this guy, and I'm going to share this graphic. I did this. I shared this last on our show last night, and this is about Josh Jacobs here. He has been an absolute catalyst to what the Raiders have done over the last month. And you see here the last month of the season, the Raiders are 4-0, 84 carries, 376 yards, 4.5 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, 13 catches, 66 yards. You made a point about Derek Carr, what he's done in terms of late game heroics all throughout his career. But this guy has been a guy they've been riding of late. Do you expect that to be the game plan on offense this week with the weather, travel, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think they will lean heavily on him. He's coming off a career best 132 yards against the Chargers. And, Raider Nation's been kind of waiting for Josh to kind of go back to that rookie campaign where he rushed for well over 1,000 yards. He has struggled running the ball this year, partly because of injuries, partly because that Raiders offensive line has struggled to run block, but something has clicked over these last 4 games. And against the Chargers, he was fantastic. I believe he's averaging 95 yards a game during this 4-game winning streak. And he's not completely healthy, banged up some ribs against the Indianapolis Colts. But yeah, I mean, I know it's going to be cold in Cincinnati. I don't think it's going to snow. But look, the Raiders like to run the ball. They like to set up that play action pass. And if they can establish the run with Jacobs, or if the Raiders do get a lead in the fourth quarter, they will milk it with Josh Jacobs, and he will get a heavy dose of that rock in that fourth quarter. Absolutely. I imagine he's going to be a huge part of this game plan.
Yeah, I think he's got 2 100-yard rushing games in the last 4, was just grinding out tough yards in that Browns game. And again, to seal their postseason ticket against the Chargers there, tough runs there by him. So he's a factor. And I've always said, Darren Waller, the Bengals have trouble with tight ends. And of course, Darren Waller is going to be a weapon, but I think more so than the first matchup this year, I think Jacobs is going to be a little bit of a factor. One other guy who's going to be a factor that I know Bengals fans are a little scared of in this matchup because of their offensive line issues is Max Crosby. Max Crosby is a guy that has, what do you have, 8 sacks this year? So there's not the gaudy numbers, but he's tops in terms of quarterback pressures. He's amazing and a lot of different things. Motor. And I watched that game Sunday. Obviously had the vested interest with what's going on with the matchup and whatnot. He absolutely ate Storm Norton's lunch that entire game. It was unbelievable. He was in the backfield almost every single play. What can the Bengals do to potentially, I don't know, negate this? Do you see a run game, getting Mixon going just to kind of keep him on his heels a little bit? Do you see chipping, or do you just say, hey, Burrow's got to be Burrow and do the magic?
Well, one thing I think is interesting is that during my research, the Bengals gave up 55 sacks this year. And I thought, well, is that Burrow hanging on to the football maybe a little bit too long to get Jamar Chase down the field, or is there a shaky offensive line? So my guess is maybe just run right at Max Crosby. I think that's what they did in the earlier matchup. And I think that's why Joe Mixon had nearly 130 rushing yards in that game earlier this year. But like you said, I mean, the guy has got a motor. He's never going to stop. He only had the 8 sacks. You could say, well, that's not very many, but I believe he led the NFL in quarterback pressures. Yeah. And what he does also on the other side of that defensive line, he loosens things up for Yannick Ngakoue, who was in double figures with sacks. So when you put those two on the field together, they do a great job of pressuring the quarterback. Now, the Raiders do not blitz a lot. I believe they blitz about 15% of the time, which is bottom in the NFL. So they rely on that front 4 to put pressure on the quarterback. Now, they did a good job against Justin Herbert. I think he threw the ball 64 times, and I think the Raiders sacked him 3 times, but they pressured him on numerous occasions. So let's see if the Bengals try to run at Crosby to try to neutralize him, or let's see if they chip him or double team him. But you know what? He's been a handful for whoever he's been going against this year.
Talking with Dennis Ackerman, co-host of the BLEAV in Raiders podcast with former Raiders Stanford Route. Go check them out. And I know he has also made an appearance previously on our buddy show D&H Sports. So happy to have him join us on this program as well. We'll just take a couple more minutes of your time. I know we're running up against it a little bit, Dennis. I don't want to push it. I would like to talk to you for a
No, all good.
Here,
I'm all good. I'm all good. Thanks.
Look, we just talked about Mixon, and you just mentioned, you know, maybe the game plan for Cincinnati should be, hey, run at Crosby to kind of negate them or at least keep them on their heels. One of the guys that has been playing outstanding football for the Raiders, particularly in this last game, was Darius Philon. And unfortunately, in that last game, I think it was late in the game, he suffered a pretty significant injury and is now unavailable. I think he's just absolutely done for the year. I think he's on IR now. So what do you make of his absence? Is that going to be a huge deal, or are the Raiders going to be able to kind of put it together with duct tape, glue, whatever, to, I don't know, make Mixon a limited factor in this game?
Well, you know what? He was a big part of their improved run defense. Right around Thanksgiving, something clicked for this team on defense in terms of stopping the run. Prior to that, they were giving up about 125 yards on the ground. But during this 4-game winning streak, they're only allowing about 75 yards. And Jonathan Taylor, I mean, you can make the case he could have been MVP for the Colts, outstanding running back. He did exceed 100 yards against this Raider defense, but they didn't allow him to rip off any large chunks, any big plays like that. So look, the Raiders like to rotate a lot of guys along that defensive front. So they do have some depth. Solomon Thomas, Jonathan Hankins has been a little bit laboring the last couple games. They're hoping he'll be healthy back in there. So they rotate a lot of guys. Philon is they're definitely going to miss him, but they do a good job of rotating a lot of players. And hopefully Saturday they can limit Mixon. Just limit the big plays. I think that's what they're looking for. You know, they'll give up the 3, 4, 5 yards. They don't want to give up the 10, 15, 20, those type of big chunk plays.
So we're going to get your prediction in a little bit of, if you want to give one, in just a minute here before we get you out of here. I'm going to kind of take a spin off of this question a little bit from a live chat. Sixer Alex, asking about which 2 Raiders players will be most improved. I don't really want to ask that specifically. My question to lead into your prediction is a little bit of a play on this question, and that would be more, what's different about this Raiders team than the one that lost by multiple scores to the Bengals a few weeks ago, and what would give them a better chance in this matchup potentially than what occurred 2 months ago?
You know, the Raiders offense actually played pretty well against the Chargers, and they got Darren Waller back. He was a little bit rusty, so I do expect him to be a little bit better. He's been out he was out for about 5 weeks with a knee injury. Hunter Renfrow, he is a big part of the Raiders offense. You got to keep an eye on him. He had 2 touchdown receptions against the LA Chargers. And we talked about earlier, Josh Jacobs, he only had 37 yards rushing in that first matchup against the Bengals. So I think he's a big part of why that Raiders offense has been better. And the Raiders defense has played much better over these last 4 or 5 weeks. You know, that Cincinnati game, I believe it was 16-13 going into the fourth quarter. And then Derek Carr had a couple of turnovers and just kind of imploded for the Raiders. But I would say the Raiders defense has been much improved since then. And Josh Jacobs is another one of the reasons, the improvement of the Raiders being able to run the football.
Okay, so an improved Raiders team coming off a 4-0 stretch against some pretty impressive teams, albeit none made the postseason, but pretty impressive wins in there. They've overcome a lot, all kinds of different storylines. The Madden passing, unfortunately. What's your prediction for this week? Because the issue, there's all that stuff. There's the team of destiny, right? Because they're overcoming all that kind of stuff, that storyline, a little bit more of a storied history as a franchise, as opposed to the Bengals in terms of success, championships, etc. And then, of course, they play the last game in week 18, and they play the first one on the road in the postseason. Long game, almost 5 full quarters, couple of injuries, all that kind of stuff, traveling, bad weather, not in the dome. How do you see this one playing out?
I'm kind of torn because part of me thinks that they've been playing quasi playoff games these last 4 weeks. Are they emotionally spent, especially after Sunday's game, going into overtime, winning on the last play? It's a short week. They got to go probably travel on Friday, and the game is on Saturday. I also look at the flip side. They've got all this momentum. Right now, they're playing with house money. Everything they do seems to be working out
Yeah.
okay. So I'm torn. Believe it or not, I have picked them the last 4 weeks on my podcast. People said I was crazy. They're not going to beat Indianapolis, and they're not going to beat the Chargers. Those two teams are better talent-wise. And I was like, okay, but you're not measuring what's going on inside that Raiders building right now. So I'm going to go with the Raiders. I'm not extremely confident saying that. I don't think it'll be a high-scoring game. The weather, I was just checking it before I came on with you. This is a high of 31, a low of 18. No snow, though, so okay, it's cold. It's probably going to be the coldest game the Raiders have played in this year. So I will go with the Raiders. I'm thinking 20-17, maybe even 19-16, but I'm not saying it with a whole lot of confidence. Put it that way, Anthony.
Well, with a lot of star power in this game at running back, at quarterback, at wide receiver, the two players that might make the biggest difference, Daniel Carlson and Evan McPherson, the kickers, right? I mean, those are the two guys that may make the biggest difference regardless of the result. Well, Dennis, Thank you for your time. I appreciate we went a little long. Before we get you out of here, though, I want our listeners to hear a little bit about your background, where they can find your stuff and where they can listen to your show, etc.
Well, myself and former Raider Stanford Rount played 8 years in the NFL, 7 of those with the Raiders. He and I co-host the BLEAV in Raiders podcast. You can find it on Apple. You can find it on Spotify, any place like that. So, and we've been doing it for about a year and a half now, and we post them every week, and we just posted one up this morning. So it's recapping the Charger game. I'll give this a little bit, Anthony. I don't think the Raiders, like I said, let me reemphasize this, they would not have played for the tie. We talk about that. We'll preview it. We'll preview it, and we also talk about Bo Jackson as well. So we hit on all those things as well in this week's podcast. So a lot of fun. Thanks for letting me talk about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you're able to coordinate a lot of different things. I know you're a busy guy to come on here and make some time. I apologize we went a little long, but this is
all good.
Great chat. And enjoy yourself this weekend, regardless of the result. I hope it's a different one than you predicted personally, but enjoy yourself regardless. And
do you have one? Do you have a prediction?
I did pick on a show earlier this week. I did pick the Bengals to win, again, a one possession game. I just think the weather, a little bit of some offensive firepower, and how, we're talking about the Raiders going 4-0. The Bengals this last month have also engaged in a lot of playoff type games, big wins against the Ravens and the Chiefs and all kinds of, and then they sat a lot of guys this last week. But so I think they've got a lot of things in their corner too. But we've seen this team stumble in big games before, the Bengals. But I just like to think that this is a different cast of characters and a little bit of a different mindset at coach, quarterback, etc., that maybe won't allow them to do that. I think it's going to be an entertaining game. I think it's going to be a close game, maybe closer than either fan base would like. But like you, I've got a close Bengals win, though.
So how it plays out on Saturday.
That's right. Absolutely. We'll see. Dennis, thank you very much. Take care. We'll catch up again with you soon, and enjoy yourself this weekend.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.